quick introduction. So thank you so much for joining us today. This is an Ohio X Tech Talk, where we bring folks together from the Ohio technology community to share their perspectives, their insights, their expertises on a whole host and range of topics and subject matters. We've done these with startup founders that are trying to find product market fit. We've done it with tech pros that are marketing experts and talk about it from a marketing expertise. And then today, we have Erich from Workforce Integrations, who's going to be talking about planning a digital strategy implementation and how companies and organizations can get started. And so how these typically work is I'll hand it over. Erich will do an introduction of himself, of Workforce Integrations, share about what they are or what they do, who they are, what part of the state they're from, because that's one of the fun things about our organization is we are statewide, and people from all over and even beyond will check this out. And so as we do that, we will hand it over. Erich will start taking us through this journey and what planning this digital strategy implementation could look like. It'll also be an opportunity, I believe, to kind of be interactive. And so I think Erich will share that in his opening remarks, but we always encourage conversation, whether it's in the comment section, whether it is, kind of raising your hand or hopping in with a quick question. And then at the end, we also reserve some time for some of those questions. And welcome, we've had a few more people jump in. We're just getting into our introduction of Erich and his conversation around digital strategy implementations. We always try to end no later than an hour after we start, because we know people have busy days with other Zooms and Teams, and now that we're starting to get back in person a little bit. But we'll kind of keep this a casual conversation, and that's the whole point. Hopefully meet someone new. The other thing we do, and I'll do this in a moment, is would absolutely recommend or invite anyone to drop their LinkedIn into the comment bar. That's a great way to hopefully meet someone new now and then be able to connect with them later, which is another reason that we do these. So without further ado, Erich, I will turn it over to you. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise and what Workforce Integrations does, and specifically around planning a digital strategy implementation. So Erich, take it away, and thank you again so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, hello, everyone. So we are talking today about tips for planning a digital strategy implementation. The agenda, we're going to go through a few things. But while we go through, as we go through this, feel free to interrupt me. I don't like talking and not being interrupted. So feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions or comments. The one thing that drives me a little crazy about presentations most of the time is that people keep it at a high level and don't talk about specifics. So this is kind of the same. But the idea is that, if you want some specifics, or, if you have implementation or a use case that you're thinking about, or that you'd like some more clarification on, maybe some technologies and things, feel free to let me know, and I'll answer that as best I can while keeping within the time frame. So we'll start with a little professional background for me. So I have a lot of different experience with technology. I started off with using some Microsoft tools, some really basic stuff, and did a couple years with 4GL ERP, got into the Unix world, which is fantastic. Did some HPUX system admin and script stuff. And let's see, did some work with retail, which was a lot of fun. A managed store software, OS, as well as POS software at the stores. And that was very interesting. It was at the time of dial-up. A lot of our stores were dial-up. And so we had to manage store systems through dial-up communication. Started my Java work early in the 2000s, maybe 2001 or so. Got into Mule in 2006, and for those that aren't familiar with Mule, MuleSoft is an integration company. They were bought by Salesforce a few years ago, but Mule started in 2005, 2006, and I was doing a project when it was very early on in development. I then did a bunch of contract work for Java. I was a trainer in Mule for a while still continuing doing some Mule work. I've been an integration consultant for over 10 years, and that's architecture, development, whatever it is, right? We're working architects. So I have worked for very small companies in the past, under 10 employees. We are a small company, all the way up to Fortune 500 companies, State Farm, Coke, the federal government, state governments, and Pfizer, companies like that. So all over the board, and really in just about every industry. So I have a pretty broad knowledge of different use cases, not necessarily one industry in particular, but just vast use case implementations. And then I've been a small business owner for 19 of my 27 years that I've been doing IT, 27, 28 years. So most of the time I've been a small business owner in one respect or another. Okay, so the first thing that we really want to talk about is the topics that we want to consider before getting into digital transformation implementation. And I'll really focus on the integration side of this because that's where my knowledge is. I do have some experience in a couple of the other areas for digital transformation, but really the integration side is where my focus is. So what we want to do in the past, businesses have operated, especially in the IT world, with a more project-based set of operations or methodology. And so what we want to do is review how we do things in IT, and understand that we need to build some infrastructure and kind of change our thinking. For the most part, it doesn't have to completely change, but we need to change our thinking when it comes to digital projects, right? Exposing data, things like that. So one of the first things that we need to do is set up the correct infrastructure, and that can be done in parallel for the most part with development, and it doesn't have to be done all at once. What we want to do though is take into consideration a number of different factors that you'll need while implementing your digital strategy. The first one is monitoring. Okay, how are you going to monitor transactions? This can happen in a number of different ways. There are technologies out there that do a nice job of monitoring, and some of these do alerting, notifications, things like that. Nagios is one of them on the kind of low-level system level that we've been dealing with for years. We have other kind of web-based products that may be provided by the vendor itself, if you have like an API vendor that you're working with, but there are other API SaaS-based solutions that provide logging and monitoring. One thing about monitoring is that monitoring and logging and auditing that you'll see in a little bit kind of go hand in hand. So what you can do is build a good logging solution for your organization that feeds monitoring as well as auditing. And, a few of the more modern tools that we have for indexers like Splunk, Elasticsearch, Log Insight. I'm a big fan of Elasticsearch. I've done some work with Splunk. They're great tools for being very flexible when it comes to monitoring and auditing. So what you want to do is take one of these tools and start small. Right? You don't have to bite off a big piece. Just start small. Figure out what you need to monitor. Going forward, how do you want to monitor your operations, right? Whether that's business operations or technical IT operations. So both of those you need to take both of those into account. Okay, auditing, kind of the same thing, just on more of a transactional level, right? How are you going to monitor all of your transactions? Again, this is both business auditing as well as IT auditing. So user logins, access, authorization, things like that. How do you keep track of all that so that if there is a problem down the road, how do you track those transactions down? And on the business side of things, some people go as far as to log the payload for each transaction, exactly when it happened, who did it, those kind of things. But it could be as simple as just logging the client, the timestamp, what operation, maybe what system it was, the transaction was run. And these can be stored either, again, in log indexer, internal database, or external tool. Again, there might be some SaaS provider that allows you to track your auditing. One of the things that we'll get into for auditing as well as monitoring and logging is that these can all be kind of stubbed out or mocked at the beginning of your project, right? So if you have an idea of what you want to do for auditing and monitoring as well as logging, build some sort of API or some interface in front of it, right? So that your developers can start using those interfaces, and then you just use those interfaces and develop them going forward. So you don't have to have a complete solution in hand. That could take months, right? These are not small topics at all. So start small, build an interface that your developers can use, and then start developing your infrastructure. But definitely, infrastructure is the way to start, at least thinking about it, right? You don't have to have a full solution in place before you start implementing your strategy. Security is huge these days, right? It is probably the most critical component of a digital strategy. We are seeing hacks all over the place, internal as well as external, and more so the focus, especially the past couple of years, has been on internal security. Not that you have malicious employees doing a bunch of bad things. These could just be accidents, right? But security will help you avoid some of those things. I'm not sure that there's no foolproof way of making sure that everything is secure, but you do your best. So spend a good amount of time understanding what security means for your organization. More and more, it's not just an easy set of credentials that you'll be allowing your users to own and use to access your system. Could be certificates, certificate-based authentication, or OAuth with multi-factor authentication. So those kind of things need to be answered. And as opposed to monitoring and logging and auditing, digital security is probably one of those things that you should have uh, answered up front. You don't have to have it completed again, but this is critical for your implementation going forward. One of the things in your strategy for security is decide whether you're going to be on-prem, cloud-based, or a hybrid. Uh, so some companies are strictly on-prem. We don't find that a whole lot anymore, but still quite a few companies are all on-prem. What we do find nowadays is a mixture of both on-prem and cloud-based. We don't see a lot of companies going completely cloud-based unless they're fairly small. But there's usually some sort of hybrid that we use. And the communication between all those pieces is usually tough to solve. Some sort of VPN tunnel between cloud and on-prem is required, but think about that before you get started. Let's see. One of the things that we do on the integration side when we start building APIs for all these clients is we want to build a consistent security model for them, so they don't have to deal with Kerberos and OAuth and basic auth and multi-factor. It's usually for our clients on the API side, it's just one security model, and then we connect to all the back-end systems with their proprietary models or implementations. So that is key, because there's nothing that's going to slow you down more than trying to figure out how to connect to a system for the first time. But if you have an API provider that does have a consistent security model, you connect to them once and you know how to connect to them, going forward. So that's usually a good way to go. One of the things that you want to do is enable client tracking, and this is for monitoring, auditing, and logging. And I have a customer that I'm working with now. They are still using, and I shouldn't say still using, a lot of people use LDAP, right? They're using AD, Active Directory. We're using LDAP queries to query AD. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, absolutely not. AD is a nice tool. But when it comes to APIs and tracking clients, we are using client-side IDs or client ID and secrets, not for authentication, but strictly for tracking. So in addition to the AD credentials that we require, we're also using client IDs to track, to do monitoring, logging, and auditing. Okay, so the final piece that we want to talk about for infrastructure, and this is a lot more important nowadays, because we have, when we were doing integration traditionally, we knew our clients, right? We had some sort of relationship with the client, whether that was an internal client or external. We'd call up a vendor and say, okay, here are your credentials. Here's the access model, authorization, authentication, things like that. Now connect to us, right? We'll open up a port and that'll be fine. Whether that's FTP or SFTP or some sort of messaging like JMS. Today, that is kind of thrown out the window, right? Traditional tools are typically insufficient for for this type of thing, because clients, we don't know who our clients are, right? They'll connect through an API, and as long as our APIs are secure and have the correct authentic authorization model, they should be able to get through. So support, documentation, and feedback are one of the things in infrastructure today that's incredibly important. Because our clients are unknown, we don't want them calling constantly and asking them how to use our APIs, right? We want plenty of documentation, and we want our applications to reflect the documentation. So you don't want something as simple as basic auth in your documentation and you have OAuth, but you've actually implemented OAuth in your API layer. So having a tool or a set of tools that allow you to document your APIs through development is usually a lot more efficient than having to do it after the fact. And honestly, still, we have so many companies that think of documentation as a nice to have instead of a requirement. So we want our clients to be self-sufficient as much as possible to decrease the support requirements. Some of those tools, wikis are fantastic. On the MuleSoft side of things, we have something called Exchange, and it's similar to Salesforce's Exchange, but it allows you to document your APIs and it's essentially a wiki, an organized wiki. So those kind of things, if your API provider provides those, they're terrific tools. Feedback is another one. If you have a good feedback tool, and this is not just on the customer side, right? Not just business customers. These are IT customers, clients. If you can get feedback from any side of the business, it will help you quite a bit in developing a good, solid, robust set of tools for your clients. So we spent a decent amount of time on infrastructure because it's really where things happen, and it's nice to have provide access to your data, allow people to get to your data, to present those in on mobile devices, in business apps, B2B type stuff. But if you don't have this, you're going to be lost, and you're going to be spending all day long trying to track down all of this information that you're now collecting. So make sure to spend some time with each of these topics and try to at least get a strategy for them. Again, I've said it a couple times, they don't have to be complete before you start your implementation, but you should have an idea of what you're doing. Any questions on that, on infrastructure? Okay, again, feel free to interrupt me if you'd like, even if we're going through some of these topics and you'd like some more clarification in previous topics. Just go ahead and interrupt me and ask. Okay, design and development. So this can happen at the same time that infrastructure is being developed. Like I said, create a good interface for all of those pieces, and your developers can start implementing those pieces without them actually being complete. So for logging, if you build a logging API, let's go with auditing. Auditing is probably a little bit better. Build an auditing API so that transactions can be sent to, uh, can be tracked, right? So the developers can go ahead and start building those APIs and building the client applications with that auditing function in place, and you can develop that as you go along. One of the keys for that is embracing some sort of agile methodology for project management. Start small, release often, work efficiently, right? You're not going to have all the answers at the beginning, and you shouldn't, right? And any business that thinks you're going to have all the answers is fooling themselves, because it will change tomorrow. So be able to try to be flexible uh, and embrace the support and feedback model, right? Get feedback from your customers, your clients, and don't think they're just being critical of things. They might be, who knows? But you want that feedback, and no matter what type of feedback it is. With agile, and I'm not specifically, I guess here I'm talking about agile, but whatever you implement, make sure that it's flexible enough to allow you to release often, and don't get caught up in kind of that waterfall methodology. Project-based project management is a little tough in this world, right? Because you're going to have a lot of different projects, and if something goes wrong, you, say your developers working on 2 or 3 different projects, there are 4 issues that come in with a previous product or project. Their timelines are going to get go all out of whack. So make sure to implement something from a project management standpoint that is flexible enough and more release based rather than project based. Communication is key. Make sure that when you do releases and deployments, that your clients and your business knows what functionality is being deployed. And usually the tools that you implement can help with that. Whether it's Bitbucket, that Atlassian set of tools, ADOS, Azure DevOps. Microsoft's done a really nice job with DevOps, and so those tools will all help in the communication side of things. So determine your tool set. Tools will make things so much easier. And I'm not talking about code generators or anything like that. The code generators drive me crazy because most of the time after you get done generating the code, you're sitting there trying to read the code and determine what's going on, and then modifying it for your use case. So I'm not a big fan of code generators, but tool sets are extremely important. Again, if you have something like Jira with a wiki and some Git repositories, they all work seamlessly together. I work in the Maven world, so Maven works nicely with those tools. But make sure that your tool set is applicable for your organization. There are typically 3 types of tooling. One for design and development, one for runtime management, meaning your servers, right? Your servers and applications, and the other for governance. On the API side of things, this is important because you want to apply policies to your APIs and not necessarily embed all that code inside of your APIs. So hopefully you have a governance tool that allows you to do authentication, authorization, logging, what else? There are a bunch of different, whitelisting type stuff on top of your API layer, and that will help a lot with your digital implementation. Okay. Let's see. So, going forward, what do we have? Once we've started our digital implementation, we always need to prepare for changes, right? We've had, in the past, things have changed. In the future, things will change. Things always change. The problem, I think, with how we've done things in the past, especially with waterfall, is that any change that we've had to projects causes interruption to those timelines, and it's just extremely hard to manage. So remember that things will constantly change. You'll get interrupted, and you need to figure out how to manage those changes rather than seeing them as an adverse reaction. There's nothing adverse about change. It will always be there. So make sure that you have that philosophy in mind and implement that. And again, embrace your feedback and support model, both on the business side and technical side. They're critics to what you've been doing, and yeah, you may not like it sometimes, at least the negative feedback that you get, but it does bring out something that's it could be an extremely minor difference or change that you need to make in your infrastructure or in your projects, but it could be extremely valuable to your clients. So take the time to provide that feedback model and the functionality for feedback, and embrace that. So I think that's it for the presentation side of things.
Well, Eric, thank you so much, and that was a really great overview and run through. I know it was a lot, so thank you so much for putting this all together and sharing it with us. For those in the crowd, feel free to a couple options to ask some questions, and I have a couple that we can start with. You can either unmute yourself and just ask it verbally. You can throw it into the chat if you'd like, or feel free if maybe you're in commute or something like that and listening. If you just want to DM me, I'm happy to kind of serve as that. But Eric, for these types of presentations, the first thing I always like to ask is, what are the two key takeaways as we kind of think about the overall theme, and whether it's a business, small, medium, or large, that you would want them to take away from this topic? Because we obviously just covered a lot. And so as we're kind of going on in our days, what are those maybe two key things that we should leave with?
I think don't concern yourself with failure, right? I think that when companies get into something like this, especially companies that haven't really taken on anything like this before, or anybody that's really transformed their business, don't consider failure to be bad, right? Again, as you go along in your either personal or professional development, it's just something that you have to deal with. This is not an easy change. A lot of these philosophies and strategies could be different for you, and just realize that there are going to be some growing pains. So just try to be flexible and open enough to make those changes, and analyze how things are going. Don't just continuously do development and just go on like nothing's nothing's happening. So I would say that's probably the biggest thing, is that that agile philosophy where you're releasing often and getting feedback and doing development based upon that feedback. That's probably one of the keys.
Great. And then a second one we have is, say you're coming into a new organization and you're just starting one of these projects, one of these transformations. What does that first, maybe 30 days look like, where you're learning and you're kind of just developing the strategies for it, and then working with some of those teams, because obviously we kind of know the end results, but as we're thinking about those first, kind of vital few days, what does that look like for you and your team?
It's just a lot of introspection, right? We go in and we'll start taking apart pieces of the business, right? And just saying, okay, well, let's focus on this side of the business, because this is where our first big win can come in, right? And what we want to look for are not the big wins, so to speak, not something that's really going to disrupt things. We want a small win that could be a stepping stone. So kind of a use case that could be repeated throughout the organization, right? So find your wins when you can, and really go through the business and identify where you want to change, what you want to change first. And don't try to bite off as big of a piece as you can. Just take what you can get, and prove out. We do a lot of POCs, proof of concepts, and think of this as just your first item, as being just a proof of concept that you want to prove to yourself and the business that you can do this. Once you have that done, then maybe bite off something that's a little bit bigger.
Okay, great. And then one other one that I have is when, let me see, I'm just kind of reading it here, is, okay, so it's essentially about, obviously in Ohio, we have a lot of small and medium-sized businesses and things like manufacturing and others that, aren't tech or maybe tech-first organizations, but increasingly we're seeing the importance of that, those kind of transformations. And if it's manufacturing, they become manufacturing tech, or, other small and medium-sized businesses. So for maybe like a CEO out there that doesn't come from a tech background, has owned or operated their business for, 20 or 30 years, how do you kind of help show them that this is needed, and for their business to become competitive and really thrive and succeed, that these digital strategies and implementing them, and kind of taking that next step for their business is important? So maybe for the traditional business community, why does all this matter?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And if I take too long to answer this, Chris, interrupt me, and just
That's okay.
because there are a lot of components to this. So what we find with companies these days is that IT has always been known as an expense, right? So back in the day, IT was a lot of the times run by finance, and finance would make the decisions for IT because it was just an expense, right? We had to keep IT costs down as much as possible. And in some respects, that's still true. Now, IT can be a good profit center these days, but there's still quite a few aspects of IT that are expenses. However, if you kind of look at IT as the ability to not open your business. I won't say that because that's a little scary for a lot of people, right? Uh, what you want to do is make your business flexible and robust, and uh, uh, how should I put this? Make it so that your company looks much better to outside influencers than what you have in the past, right? So a good digital strategy will do that. Whether that's building a set of APIs or building a mobile app uh, for uh, for your internal customers as well as external customers. Those kind of things will make you look much better to outside organizations. And whether that's you wanting to, because we see a lot of it today, right? You wanting to purchase other businesses or you being purchased. So those are two aspects that a lot of companies don't think about. They, they're just looking at the financial side of things. Oh, can we buy this company to make us more profitable, increase our revenue? Can we be bought because we're doing such a great job selling and our profit margins are up, right? Um, think of those companies, those outside influencers, as not just looking at your financial uh, situation, but also your operational situation with IT. Are your systems flexible? Can they be plugged into another organization quickly? Can you plug in other businesses into your organization quickly? Those types of things. So from a management perspective, an executive perspective, I think IT's become much more critical for the overall health of your organization. And so while that IT expense has been there in the past for reporting and things like that, it's a lot more critical now than it has been. And I think will continue to be.
Absolutely. Well, unless we have any other questions, I think I had mine and then a couple others that came in. So, Eric, thank you so much. We really appreciate you sharing what you and Workhorse Integrations are doing and the expertise behind it. Any final thoughts or comments that you would like to share? And on top of that, if there's, how do people connect with you? What website, email, anything that you'd like to put out there?
Sure. Yeah, I can put my uh, information into the chat. I believe Beth is on. Maybe she can take care of that. Um, and you can find me on LinkedIn at Erich Leipold, just first name and last name. There is another Erich Leipold that's spelled exactly the same, but I think there's only one other one in the United States. So um, the you know don't uh, don't think this is too big to these projects are too big to take on. There are plenty of tools out there that allow you to do things at, even for a small business. So the the idea is not to get overwhelmed and try to do too much at one time. Uh, just think of it as like a proof of concept, and if it does take too long and you think that this is going to be too much to take on, then that's fine. But what you'll realize is that there are other companies out there uh, about your same size, whoever that might be, that are doing this. So get help. Consult with your friends or peers, in your industry, and try to figure it out because uh, it's probably not going away.
Mhm. Okay. Well, great. Well, Eric, thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking time to chat with us today and share, your expertise that you have at Workhorse Integration. So thank you so much, and thank you to everyone who's attended. As with all of these, we have this recorded, so we'll get it up on the YouTube channel, so we can have some playback and on-demand viewing options as well. But want to thank everyone for spending your Wednesday morning with us. Really appreciate everyone's time, and I hope you all have a great day. So thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, everyone.